COVID-19 awareness program is supported by Telecom PNG, always there. And Protex, clean hands, good health.
Hello and welcome to MTV's COVID-19 awareness program. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a great impact in all aspects of life. We have just seen the drastic impact it has had on economies around the world, PNG included. We have Mr. Dirk Wagner, who is the UNDP resident representative here in PNG, to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on families and local businesses here in PNG. Hello, sir, and thank you for joining us in the studio today. Yes. So, sir, firstly, could you please give us an overall perspective on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and what it has done to the PNG economy?
Thank you, Bradley. First, thanks of all for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here in the morning. There has, of course, been a very huge impact on the PNG economy, which is still evolving. There's obviously, a slump in oil prices and commodity prices, which has a huge, effect on the PNG economy. But moreover, there's, of course, also an impact, on smaller businesses. There's an impact on families, or there's a specific impact on other sectors. Let's look at the hospitality sector. That's obviously one which has been very hard hit because there are currently no visitors coming to the country because of the international flight restrictions and the lockdown. And I think there have also been restrictions on, or difficulties on getting goods from A to B within the country, and that, of course, has had an impact, on small traders and service providers. And we also know that, some people in the urban areas, for example, some of them lost their jobs in formal employment, right? So I would say the impact is still evolving. I think it is probably a little bit too early to see exactly where we are going to be at the end of the year, but there's no doubt that this crisis will have a huge impact, not just on the global economy, but also on the Papua New Guinean economy and also on some of the social aspects.
True. Now, UNDP as an organization that works closely with the government, you have a keen interest in trying to understand how this impacts, is having on the local economy. How can we measure the seriousness of these impacts on the economy?
Well, there are of course, a number of measurements available. They are either at the micro level or more the macro level, right? If you look at the macroeconomic level, one can, of course, look at exports, GDP, trade, numbers of visitors or arrivals, that gives you an idea of, how the global macroeconomic system works. But we can, of course, also look more at the micro level. We can look at household income, for example. We can look at, how many small and medium enterprises were actually affected by that crisis. How has it impacted, on the livelihoods of ordinary Papua New Guineans? But then there are, of course, also what we call proxy indicators. So these are other indicators which may tell you something about how the crisis has impacted people. You can look at the crime rate. Usually we see a small hike, in crime rates going up because people lose, access to normal means of generating livelihood, so they have to revert maybe to illegal means. And very unfortunately, we can also witness an increase of gender-based violence because during the lockdown, the people were locked at home, and that led sometimes to frictions and higher occurrences, unfortunately, of gender-based violence.
True. So research is important in this regard to understand how this has impacted the small people, as you've said. Now, tell us about the socio-economic impact assessment that the UNDP is leading.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, we are leading that impact assessment on behalf of the entire UN family. So UNDP, together with our UN partners, other agencies, has actually embarked and putting together an assessment which looks specifically into those questions which you have just raised. And we want to look in particular onto those segments of society which are the most vulnerable, right? So we want to look, at the households which are already struggling, which are at the lower sort of income level, and we want to look at micro, small and medium enterprises to see a little bit more precisely what has been the impact on them, how they are trying to weather the storm. And then that impact assessment will also give a bit of guidance or recommendations on what can we actually do to either create some social safety nets, or what policies or programs can not only development partners, but also obviously the government, international financial institutions, but also the private sector. What is it they can actually do, to help those most vulnerable segments of the population or the smaller businesses to actually get through this crisis? What are those measures? Is it grants, or is it any other assistance or tax breaks? There are so many different measures, one can take. But what's important, of course, firstly, is to see what exactly is actually the impact. So we need to be able to somehow measure it, and then we can translate that into some targeted recommendations.
Okay, so in terms of the research itself, we understand that COVID-19 is not only a Papua New Guinean issue. It's bigger than us. It's something that's global. So I think the research, not only in Papua New Guinea but elsewhere in the world too, that has been done.
Yes, of course, the UN system globally looks at, how can we countries, to get through this crisis, and how can we kickstart socioeconomic recovery. And I think very much everything is also about how can we build back better. That's a term we've been using many times, because on the one hand you can say, well, maybe the environment benefits currently from having less fossil fuels being burned, so there's less impact, let's say, on climate change. On the other hand, this has of course a huge impact on economies. It has also shown us, I think, globally how dependent economies are. Papua New Guinea is, in terms of its revenues, very much obviously dependent on export of natural resources, oil and gas in particular. So if there's no demand globally for that, or if the prices go down, it has a heavy effect on the economies. So what we like to see is actually how can we help to build back better? How can we, for example, diversify economies globally so they are less dependent on commodity prices and are more resilient to those external shocks? And I also want to say here, I don't believe that this will be the last type of this shock. Nature is sending us a message. I think we all know that, this coronavirus, this horrible virus, has actually jumped over from the wildlife to us humans, because we've been, starting encroaching on those habitats of wildlife. And that is the very reason why those viruses, actually got hold of us. So the message in here is also, that we have to protect our environment, and that we have to have more resilient and more sustainable economies, and that we need to diversify more, because that, in the end of the day, will make us more resilient to absorb those shocks or to avoid them altogether.
True, true. The UNDP representative in the country. We'll go for a short break now and return with more of the conversation after the break.
Telecom PNG ilike halibim you long lookout him you yet na family belong you long sick coronavirus or COVID-19 one time 5 platok save. Wasim Hanol get a time one time soap na wara in up long 20 seconds. Karamapin mouse one time hand screw long you time you kus behind Wasim Han. Toromol something also hand glove na dirty paper I go long rub his place. Sanap 1.5 meter long way long all get a man married time you round long public. Cleaning close to all antap belong mobile, key, wallet, laptop na all something where all line is have a hole in planting. Telecom PNG, always there.
Help stop the spread of germs and protect your loved ones with Protex. Here are some simple hand washing tips. Use soap or liquid hand wash. Vigorously scrub hands in circular motion. Scrub in between fingers and nails. Do not forget the back of the palm and around the wrist. Rinse with clean running water. Dry hands with a clean paper towel or cloth. Protex. Clean hands, good health.
Welcome back. For those of you who just tuned in, we have Mr. Dirk Wagener who is the UNDP resident representative here in PNG, to talk about the impacts of COVID-19 on families and local businesses here in PNG. We've touched on the social, economic, the study that the UNDP is leading. Now, if we could just touch base on the government bodies and private sector organizations that are working with you on this.
I mean, firstly, and I think I mentioned it a while ago, this is of course very much a one UN effort, so we work very closely with all the other UN agencies which are present here in country on this survey. In terms of government, we work very closely with the Department of National Planning and Monitoring, which is our lead cooperating agency, which is very closely involved and which provided also a lot of guidance for us, to be able to move forward. But we are also partnering with the private sector, obviously. So we have a partnership with the Business Council in PNG, the MSME Council. We've also spoken to the Port Moresby Chamber of Commerce, and they're all helping actually to disseminate the news and the survey instruments which are part of this assessment. That's very important. And we also work with your colleagues from the NBC to also help, to disseminate the survey. And I also had a chance to interview with them so that actually people across the country know that this assessment is going on, that they know that their surveys are being undertaken. And we also work with DigiCell. DigiCell has actually set up a call center and is making sure we get, the response rates we need actually to have a representative result in our surveys.
Okay, so the survey itself, how do you plan to carry out this exercise?
Yeah, so the survey is already ongoing. It'll still be on at least until 29 of May. And the survey has actually two instruments. It's two surveys. One is a household survey, and the other one is a small and medium enterprise survey. So the household survey will really tell us, it's called a household income and expenditure survey. So it'll very much tell us how, the more vulnerable segments of the households, how they have been affected. Have they lost their jobs? Is there a loss of income? Do they have still the same amount of money available, for the livelihoods of their families, for example? Or we look similarly into how have the micro, small and medium enterprises been affected by the COVID crisis. Did they need to lay off staff? Did they need to close business? How much is it they have lost in revenues? And the good thing about these two surveys is also they are quite detailed. So we get a lot of information about, where do those people live? Do they live in an urban setting or in a village? In which province do they call home? So we'll be able in the end, once we analyze, all the data coming in, we'll be able to analyze per province and per segment of society what that impact really is. We are targeting at least responses from 5,000 households and at least from 2,500 micro, small and medium-sized enterprises.
Okay, so at the end of all these studies, what do you hope to achieve, and where will this study sit? Will it be presented to government?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, firstly, we hope to be able to better answer those questions which you have already posed at the beginning of this interview. You've been asking me what exactly is the impact, on the PNG economy and on the livelihoods of the people. So we want to be in a position to actually better answer these questions, and we want to specifically be able to answer them with regard to the vulnerable segments of the society as well as micro, small and medium enterprises. So we want to be able to say exactly this is the impact, the global COVID crisis, the national crisis and also the lockdown measures had on those segments of the society. And then we want to be able to draw from that, lessons learned and make recommendations and say, for example, the households have really been heavily impacted in this way, and so we are proposing certain measures, to address this type of issues. We will work very closely also with other development partners and obviously with government. So once we have a draft report, we will also share it, we will socialize it, because I think it needs to be a well-grounded report which receives the feedback from all stakeholders, because at the end of the day we want this to be also a living document, a document which can be really used, to inform government policies and programs, but also to inform, the response of the development partners, including the UN.
Okay, so you are aware that the government think tank NRI has also worked on something similar to what you're doing now?
Yes. We work very closely with NRI and all other think tanks and partners. I think there will be no one survey which will answer all questions, or not one impact assessment which answers all questions. For example, our partners from the international financial institutions like the World Bank and the ADB, they obviously look at more the macroeconomic picture. They look at the debt situation of the country. These are things they are very much interested in. We as the UN are interested in, how is the average Joe, the small Jane on the street being impacted, by this crisis. How are female-headed households are being affected? How are those people affected who work in the informal sector, right? Who don't have anyway access to, a steady formal, income from a formal employment. So we really want to see how they've been hit by the crisis and what we can do to better help them.
True. On a personal note, better understanding the people and letting them know that this is something bigger than themselves. It's a global pandemic, of course.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's a pleasure having you on board with us in the studio today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Bradley.
All right. For more information on COVID-19 update in the country and what the authorities are doing, visit MTV online website and Facebook page for regular daily updates, and also join our news team for stories as they happen. Before we go, MTV would like to thank the following partners, Protex and Telecom, whose support has made this program possible to inform, educate, make aware, prepare, and update Papua New Guineans nationwide on COVID-19. I leave you now with Reverend Pastor Joseph Walters with words of encouragement and prayer.
Hello, I trust you're good. Let me quickly once again talk to you from Psalm 38 and verse 8. I want you to make a note of that psalm, as well as the other psalms or other passages of scripture, and read them over and let God use His word to touch you, to help you, to heal you, to rescue you, and to provide for you. But Psalm 38 verse 8 says, I am feeble and severely broken. I am feeble, that means I am weak, I am helpless, I am powerless, I am defenseless, I am in trouble. And it says, I am severely broken, broken-hearted. It cannot get anywhere. Things have gotten worse for this person who wrote this psalm. Maybe it relates to your situation. In your life, you're going through a broken situation. It could be a marriage, relational thing. It could be some physical thing or any other area of your life. You're going through that broken situation and you're feeling weak, powerless, helpless, and feeble. But God says He can help you. Here the writer of this psalm also goes on to say, I groan because of the turmoil of my heart. So there's turmoil or trouble, instability, pain and misery going on in his heart. That's why he groans. He's in a lot of agony and pain. He or she cannot get out of it. And once again, this could be your problem, challenge, situation, and experience. But come to God, admit your feebleness and weakness and difficulty and brokenness, and allow Him to rescue you and save your life today. God is willing, and He will do it today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Help stop the spread of germs and protect your loved ones with Protex. Here are some simple hand washing tips. Use soap or liquid hand wash. Vigorously scrub hands in circular motion. Scrub in between fingers and nails. Do not forget the back of the palm and around the wrist. Rinse with clean running water. Dry hands with a clean paper towel or cloth. Protex. Clean hands, good health.
A global pandemic has been declared by the World Health Organization.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Our government, agencies of government, SOEs, business communities and the citizens of PNG are expected to mobilize and stand together to fight this common global enemy, COVID-19. We do this in two ways: follow the directions and adhere to messages from the government and authorities. Come forward and assist the authorities. We at Telecom chose both. We joined the government to appeal to every citizen to practice good hygiene and to take extra care. And in case of emergencies, please contact our hotline on 1-800-200. Telecom PNG, always there.
This COVID-19 awareness program is supported by Telecom PNG, always there. And Protex. Clean hands, good health.